Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, your number one source for income-oriented investing. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Harvest High Income Shares, more specifically HHIS. First of all, we do have some news on the high income shares front. A latest one was added, everyone, and it's not a very surprising one in my opinion. I was hoping maybe for Robinhood, for me anyway. That's just my opinion. Maybe they'll add Robinhood. But Apple is coming, so Apple is going to be high income share stock number 15. You have the stock symbol here. They filed the preliminary prospectus. So I have it on good information, let's say, that Apple is going to be added to HHIS, which is the all-in-one, which, by the way, is doing amazing. I think it's like a record-breaking Harvest ETF. It's just not even 4 months old, and it's almost at 300 million AUM. So HHIS, in case you didn't know, is a combination, or it's the all-in-one for all these leveraged single stock covered call ETFs. Also, it has no management fee on top. So essentially, HHIS has a management fee of 0.4, 40 basis points, because all the single stock covered call ETFs inside of it are 40 basis points. So just like my thumbnail, a picture, you see that Apple is going to be added. So Apple is going to be stock number 15 in HHIS, which is going to complete HHIS. So why do I say complete HHIS? Well, if we look at the press release of March 7th, you see that this is a quote from Michael Kovac, CEO. HHIS is designed to include up to 15 Harvest Enhanced High Income Share ETFs. So for now, from this press release, it's going to be 15. My assumption, guys, is that that they're going to release a bunch more high income shares. Hopefully there'll be a Robinhood one. Maybe there'll be a Shopify, some Canadian names as well. But it seems to me like for the time being, at least, HHIS is going to include 15. So I wanted to, first of all, break the announcement. It's not really a breaking news that Apple is going to be number 15. But I want to talk a little bit about HHIS because I've been seeing some stuff in the Facebook group. And I've been getting some messages about this one, really asking, okay, well, what is the actual risk of HHIS? Because HHIS does have a very, very high yield. It started at $12, which gave it a 25% yield, right? Based on a 25-cent a month distribution. Right now, and by the way, I'm filming this on the 13th of May, and it's been going up substantially. And the distribution is still 25 cents. The stock is almost at $12 now, almost back at the ETF anyways, almost back at $12. So what is the actual risk of owning HHIS, of owning these now or gonna be soon 15 stocks? Let's talk about that. So again, HHIS, everyone, is going to be an amalgam of those 15. And you could see here that they started off as equal weight, but obviously if the stock is doing really, really well, it's going to gain percentage in HHIS. So you see Palantir, MicroStrategy have been doing really, really well. This is as of April 30th, so it's 2 weeks behind, but I'm sure Palantir, MicroStrategy, and now even Coinbase are going to be high percentages. But obviously if some stocks do really well, the percentage is going to be a bit higher. And if the stocks don't do as well, the percentage is going to be maybe a little bit lower, like Google and AMD, which have been struggling lately. But again, this is as of April 30th. But anyway, what is the risk of HHIS? What really are you investing in? Well, guys, it's very, very simple. The risk, and we know I've said this many times, if you're going to add covered calls to something, you're lowering the risk versus holding that same thing by itself. So for example, Amazon with covered calls is less risky than just holding Amazon. But if you're adding 25% leverage and all the ones in HHIS have 25% leverage, you're increasing the risk with that 25% leverage. So covered calls lowers the risk, 25% leverage increases the risk. So your risk is more or less very similar. I'm not going to say equal. Similar to just holding that thing without any covered calls or leverage, right? So Amazon with covered calls and 25% leverage, the risk level, the volatility level is very similar to just holding Amazon. Just same thing applies for the S&P 500, right? Like USCL, the risk level is similar because there's covered calls that lowers the risk, 25% that raises it. It's the risk level is similar to holding the S&P 500. HYLD, same thing, similar to holding VSP, etc., etc. So that is really the risk, everyone. And I just want to do a little deep dive because HHIS does have, or is going to have 15 stocks. These are the stocks. Why I'm making the video is because I see people say HHIS is speculative or something like that. I've seen someone say that, or it's too high risk. It hasn't proven itself. If I have some news for you, and I hope you don't get offended. If you think HHIS is speculative, you're an income poop. Okay, you have no idea what you're talking about. Because let's look at these stocks. Eli Lilly, Amazon, Microsoft, Nvidia, Netflix, Palantir, Alphabet, Meta, Tesla, AMD, Broadcom. These are all very, very big cap blue chip stocks, which make up actually the biggest chunk of the NASDAQ 100. So let's look at the NASDAQ 100, guys. This is the NASDAQ 100. What are the top stocks? Of course, there's a stupid ad here. Let's see if we could refresh this. All right. What are the top stocks in the NASDAQ 100? Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, Broadcom. That's 5. These are, so far, all of them are in HHIS. Okay. In HHIS, yes, yes, yes. Broadcom, yes. Meta, yes. Netflix, yes. Costco, yes. Tesla, yes. Google, yes. Already, the top 10 stocks in the NASDAQ are in HHIS. That leaves 5 more. Palantir is right here. If we scroll a little bit more down, we have AMD. That's 12. These are big cap stocks, not in the top 10, but in the top of the NASDAQ 100. So that's 11, 12. Scroll a bit down, we have MicroStrategy. Whereas there's MicroStrategy. That's 13. So 13 of the 15 stocks are very high up, if not the top ones, in the NASDAQ 100. That only leaves Eli Lilly and Coinbase. So why isn't Coinbase? Coinbase is a NASDAQ stock, but why don't you see it in the NASDAQ 100? I was breaking my head about this for about 30 seconds when I realized the NASDAQ 100 index is NASDAQ top 100 companies on a NASDAQ, excluding financials. Coinbase is considered a financials company. That's why it's not typically not in a NASDAQ 100 index, but it's still a top stock in the NASDAQ. Not only that, today, May 13th, Coinbase is going to be, the news came out that it's going to be included in the S&P 500. So today, Coinbase jumped 22% because it's going in the S&P 500. Coinbase is a big cap blue chip stock, everyone. Then you have Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly is listed in the S&P 500. If we look at the S&P, that's QQCL. If we look at the S&P 500, and by the way, I'm showing you XYLD, which is the S&P 500 covered call ETF, but nonetheless, you see that Eli Lilly is a top stock in the S&P 500. It's actually just under Visa and JP Morgan. And by the way, a lot of the top stocks in the NASDAQ are also top stocks in the S&P 500. Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, Meta, Broadcom, check. Google, Tesla, Netflix, Costco. So basically, these 15 companies, guys, I just want to make sure you understand, these are not speculative companies at all. Actually, the complete opposite. They're massive, big cap blue chip stocks that make up the biggest chunk of the NASDAQ 100 and even the S&P 500. So if you read anyone saying that HHIS, which is a combination of these 15 stocks, is risky or speculative, they have no idea what they're talking about. They're dumb. All right? Sorry to say, but that's the truth. So the reason, how do I view HHIS's risk? It's very simple. As a concentrated, you could say, version of the NASDAQ 100, excluding Eli Lilly and Coinbase. They're not in there for the reasons I gave you. So you could say that it's kind of like a concentrated version of QQCL. And by the way, which is, the NASDAQ 100 index with covered calls and 25% leverage. What's really cool about HHIS is that the fee is actually less than half of QQCL. It's 40 basis points instead of 85 basis points. Of course, the MERs are going to be higher because they both have leverage, but this is why I look at the management fee, not the MER, because the MER is going to have leverage costs, of course, but 85 basis points QQCL, 40 basis points HHIS. So HHIS gets a big point there because it's 45 basis points less, which, you know, could add up over the years. But this is why I personally consider the best way to think about HHIS is, or the risk level, it's like a concentrated NASDAQ. And by the way, I did a calculation. The top, you know, or the 13 stocks in the NASDAQ 100, which make up HHIS, all of them except Eli Lilly and Coinbase, just those 13 stocks make up about 55% of the NASDAQ 100 index itself. So HHIS is like, or QQCL, whatever you could say different ways, but HHIS is like 55% of QQCL, just those stocks. So yes, it's a little bit higher risk than the NASDAQ 100, but not a crazy amount because those 13 stocks make up a big chunk, fit over half of the NASDAQ 100 itself, and even make up a big chunk of the S&P 500 itself. Now that Coinbase is going to be, by the way, added to the S&P 500. So I just wanted to make a quick video sharing the news about HHIS, right? Apple's going to be added. We know the 15 companies, and I see it. Just killed a fly. I've been killing flies all day in this stupid house. So I see HHIS as a concentrated NASDAQ. Now, another question I get on HHIS is how are they able to sustain a 25, 26, 27% distribution yield? It would be better if my mic was here. How does HHIS sustain such a high yield? Well, let's compare it to what yield you could get with a covered call 25% leverage strategy on the NASDAQ 100 itself. And the answer is, let's look at QQCL. The yield you're going to get is typically between 13 and 14.5%, 15% yield on the NASDAQ. Remember, they're doing NASDAQ or NDX calls on QQCL. So what is the volatility level, more or less, of the NASDAQ? Well, you know how the S&P 500 has the VIX, VIX. Well, if you do VXN, that's actually the NASDAQ 100 volatility. So you see that right now it's about 21. It's typically a little bit more than the VIX. All right, as far as I could see, the volatility of the NASDAQ is just a little bit more than the VIX typically. This is why QQCL has 1 or 2% more yield than USCL, right? Than the S&P 500. And that you'll typically see that everywhere. NASDAQ 100 covered call ETFs typically have a little bit more yield than the S&P 500 covered call ETFs. Not by much, because like you saw, a lot of the same stocks, the top stocks, are in both indexes, right? So VXN, by the way, in case you didn't know, is the volatility for the NASDAQ 100. So that's going to indicate the amount of yield you're going to get on the NASDAQ 100. What about on HHIS? Well, they're doing the covered calls on these 15 stocks, soon to be 15 with Apple. So we need to find out what is the volatility level, what is the VIX, if you will, on these stocks. And you could use a tool called Market Chameleon to see the IV, the 30-day IV, or the 30-day implied volatility of any stock. So let's go through a few of them that are in HHIS, starting with the really, really high volatility ones, which we all know. There's MSTR. You see here at the top, you'll see 30-day implied volatility, 68.8. That's a crap load higher than 21. This is very, very high volatility. It's actually was a lot higher last month or two, but now it's actually, you see that it's a little bit subdued. NVIDIA, 50. AMD, 41. Tesla, 59. Coinbase, 67, very high volatility. Palantir, very high volatility, 58. But of course, you have some more calm ones like Amazon and Amazon, 26.9. Microsoft, 18, very calm stock. Apple, probably near the same range as Microsoft. Lilly, 33. Netflix, 28. Costco is going to be very low. So a lot of these stocks, guys, actually, I would say most of them, with the exception of maybe Apple, Microsoft, Costco, what else? Meta's a little bit subdued, but the average volatility of all of these, I'm talking about the average of these 15, is going to be way higher than the NASDAQ 100. So this is why HHIS could easily afford to give us higher yield, because they're generating a lot more premiums. Remember that covered calls are based on premiums. That's why the premiums from Coinbase and Palantir and Tesla are much higher than the yield you get from Costco or Amazon or Meta or Google, right? MicroStrategy, very, very high. The distributions are going to be much higher when something is more volatile. So I just wanted to show that to you guys. You could check the 30-day IV volatility for any stock on this tool. Just go to it's marketchameleon.com, by the way. Very cool tool where you could check out volatility. So obviously, a lot of these stocks, and I would say most of them in HHIS, are a lot higher volatility. Hence, you could get a lot more yield. And it looks to me that it's about double. The average is maybe double the yield. Maybe the average is maybe 40, maybe a bit less than that. So it would make 100% sense that HHIS would have approximately double the yield of a QQCL. So hopefully that answers that question as well. And again, guys, just wanted to share my thoughts on HHIS. What is really the risk level? What you're really investing in? The fact that Apple is going to be number 15. And it really, the way I see it, guys, it's a concentrated NASDAQ 100. So will it do better than the NASDAQ 100? Well, if these 15 stocks do better than the overall NASDAQ 100, of course it will. If the average does worse, it's going to do worse. So that is really what you're investing in. Make sure you're careful of when you read people on Facebook that don't know what they're talking about. They say stuff that makes no sense. You got to question it. Make sure you do your own research. Hopefully this was informative for you. Give me a thumbs up, guys. Hit that like button. And please subscribe. We got to get to 100,000. I would really appreciate you subscribing. If you have any other questions on HHIS that I didn't cover, let me know in the comment section below. Do you own HHIS? Do you like it? Why don't you own it if you don't? Why don't you like it? Or if you don't own it, why not? Why don't you like it? Let me know in the comment section below. Take care, everyone. Stay passive.